So today what I want to do is start a new project because new projects are fun. I'm going to try to write the domain model for a feature toggling service. As you can see from this list, this is kind of the features I want to put into it. The important parts are that I want it to be effectively event stored, and the API needs to be able to fetch toggle states. I want it to support statistics on the toggles, and then I want it to also be storage agnostic if possible. So in this case, I'll try and ship it with a file store to start with, or an in-memory store, and then the likely other option will be Postgres, because that's my favourite database. Other things that I need to consider will be how to do security. My use case for this software is going to be probably at work, and as we use Identity Server, it seems like a good idea just to hand authentication off to that, especially as I'm reasonably certain Identity Server does better authentication than I do. And Wolfie, I see one of your chat messages saying that your chat message didn't show up. So there's an oxymoron for you. Yeah, I also want to provide a nice UI so that it can display the statistics so that people can manage their toggles. One of the main issues you get with feature toggles is that old or stale toggles just hang around forever. I really want to push that kind of information. Yes, possibly. Is that better? Streaming against the TI. I don't know what that is. I'm not young and cool enough to know these things. Let's see. Recording devices. Microphone. Oh, let's try that instead. Yeah, new microphone, so I don't have to broadcast using horrible laptop microphone. Yeah, so the other part of the features that I want to put in is tags, so that you can tag a set of feature toggles for maybe a particular environment or a particular application. Environments, I think I'll just support as tags, but not sure yet. And for added fun, I'm going to try and do a little bit of maybe not quite test-driven development, but maybe test-aided. And I'm going to make it .NET Core because I want to be able to deploy this to Linux. As I have no idea how I'm going to host this yet, and I don't particularly care at the moment, I'm just going to make it a class library. And I've already put the hard work in of working out what I'm going to call this thing, which has got a long and horrible backstory behind it, so I'm not going to bother explaining it. It's called Crispin, because that's a good name. And we will call this project Crispin, and I suppose we better capitalize that. There is a folder here called Crispin already that just has the README document in it, and a Git repository, and nothing else. So I actually want to put a source folder on this because I like to have all my source under one location to try and keep the root of the project a little cleaner. I think that's right. Yeah, that'll do. I did select .NET Core, didn't I? Oh, we'll find out in a minute. That looks like .NET Core. Yes, it is. Excellent. So that can go away. Now, the first thing we want to do is add another project, which is going to be our tests. No, that's not right. have I messed up the project layout already? Yes, yes I have. Excellent. Go away. Don't do things. It's one of those things that I should have used the command line for. So let's just open it, Explorer, and fix where I've put everything. Oh, that's not too bad. That wants to go... those want to go up a level. And let's get rid of the idea folders. That's fine. And the solution file will need to be modified slightly. Let's do that. And I think actually I'm going to put the solution file at the root. So that feels... no, that's not the root. Yeah, I prefer that. I think that's fine. No, it isn't. Source. I promise you this will all get marginally smoother once I've created the projects. Should have done this before I started streaming. Then you could have all pretended that I'm competent. Git ignore file would probably be quite useful. Let's grab another one's. That's better. Blank projects. So you can use the start command on the command line to actually launch your default editor, which hopefully is Rider. Or nothing. Oh no, it is Rider. Good. The first thing I'm going to do is now add in a bunch of NuGet packages to the tests library. I'm not certain if I've done anything right. That's not where I told you to look. That definitely says source, doesn't it? Ah, there's two solution files. Great. This is going well so far. And I can't delete from this because Atom doesn't like the fact that my D drive isn't a real D drive. So just use the command line for that. And as an explanation, my laptop came with a single C drive, so I use the DOS devices registry key to make a D drive appear. In fact, if you look at my C drive, there is a D drive on it. And as we want to pretend that this mistake never happened, I'll just amend the last commit. Never do this if you've actually pushed commits anywhere, because then people who've already cloned those commits, if you then push, you'll have to force push and then their repository will be out of sync. Right, now hopefully, if I try to reload these, what have I broken this time? Source, Crispin project. That's right, isn't it? Oh well, if in doubt, delete them and re-add them. See, this is why I do sometimes like doing Node.js development, because there's a command line that just works. Right. Come on, let me add another one. Right, if I save that, now I can diff what I got wrong. I could have sworn I had the word source in there. Oh well, I'm clearly going mad. Just pretend that never happened. Voila. See, clean history, that never happened. No evidence, no one can accuse me of it. So I'll just delete these. Now, one of the packages I like to use is AutoFixture, but as I recall, that doesn't yet support .NET Core. AutoFixture. Or is it packages? I think it's packages. Hooray. No downloads of this version. No dependencies. Well, that doesn't tell me a lot. There was an open pull request for .NET Core on this. Migrate. Oh well, just to try and install it, see what happens. Right. While we think about that, we obviously need XUnit. Again, I'd much rather use Fixie, but that's not been updated for .NET Core yet either. Although I believe that's going to happen soon. And XUnit's a decent middle ground. It's not as slow as NUnit, and its attributes make a bit more sense to me. I think I need to install that as well. Maybe. And assertion libraries, I like Shoodly. Mostly because it gives you really nice error messages that actually tell you what went wrong, as opposed to, say, NUnit's built-in ones which just tell you that something went wrong. Rather like those annoying lights on your car dashboard. General engine fault. Thanks. What is wrong with my engine? Shoodly, XUnit. Probably will end up needing N substitute as well. And technically I shouldn't install these because I don't need them yet, but failed to retrieve information about system component model type converter from remote source ddev packages. Okay. Let's just use NuGet. Don't do that. I love it when things work as you expect. Sources. Let's get rid of... I think I might have deleted that when I was clearing things up. That can go away as well. Right. 17th time's a charm. Hooray. Right, hopefully everything builds still. I've not done anything that should break anything. Right, now let's add just... I always, as I said the other day on the stream, I always add, if I can spell it, a scratchpad test file, which just takes in the iTest outputs helper and has a single test. Would if autocomplete actually worked. There we are. When testing something. Something I also noticed when trying to use a Finnish keyboard is it's much harder to use the underscore notation between because of where the key is. English keyboards don't have that problem though. So let's go true. That's not the word true. Should be false. Good. That should break. It should be detected at a test as well. Or not. Is this where I need to edit the project file? I'm going to add something in. How do you edit the project file from this? I've done it before, I'm sure. F4. Right, I think I need something in here. I can't remember what though. But I do know I've got another .NET Core project knocking about somewhere, which does work. Which one was it? Let's try that. No, don't save anything, because I clearly messed those solution files up. Don't overwrite them. Right. It needs to be an app. Oh yes, of course, test projects are actually executables. And we've got xunit, xurun in Visual Studio, shouldly ncp studio, and possibly that is needed? Maybe. Let's just try that. Can always add it in afterwards. Oh, that's detected as a test now. Run test shortcut is not doing anything though, and I see a lot of errors in the event log. No, that's all about NuGet packages. Let's try the unit test window. Please install package Microsoft.NET. That's very useful. Good, it is that one. But I don't know if that's the latest version. So let's just grab that from NuGet itself instead. 15.3. I can see why people get a bit annoyed with .NET Core. I want to like it. The allure of being able to deploy to Linux hosts is what enthuses me on it. Right. Let's try running the test. Come on, break. Then we have the easiest test case in the world to fix. Should be false, but was not. Good, let's make it true. Hooray, good. And now we're just going to remove the content of that test. Success! I think we should also add the reference. Let's see if we can do it through the UI. Add reference. That. Cool. I should stop removing my new lines at the end of files. Projects. Tests. Setup. Test dependencies. Now I could start with a build script, but boring. I said I was going to do domain model, so we'll do that. Let's shut all of that. Now, my usage, if I go back to, not that, oh yeah, I did actually forget to save it as a project in Atom. Shut these solution files before I overwrite and break everything again. README can stay. Didn't think I'd make any changes. No. Edit projects. Edit project. There we go. Good. Now I can switch back to it with ease. Now, my features I had here were that I wanted it to be eventy style, because I like event sourcing. Now, I need to... Well, let's start with creating a feature toggle. So, I'm going to create an acceptance test. I should probably give it access there. By rename. Now, I have absolutely no idea of what kind of structure I wanted to take. So let's just start with I don't know, when creating a feature toggle. So our toggle, let's call it a feature toggle. There's a decision already. Toggle or feature toggle? You could use it to toggle other things other than features. So let's call it toggle. So toggle.create. I prefer making a static creation method rather than using the constructor on these kind of things, because then it lets me keep have a different construction as opposed to how the constructor is used. So I can expose a constructor that can be used to load the thing from an event stream, and you end up with a bit more of an explicit, this is creating a new entity as opposed to this is creating a new class in memory. Although this is going to be storage agnostic, so yeah. Right, so toggle equals. Now, what do toggles require? I mean, I've got down here that the API has to return ID, name, description, and state. My vague idea with the ID was that you could then rename toggles if you made a typo. But you could use the name as an ID. But what happens if you have a feature toggle called, I don't know, new feature enabled, and then once that feature is completely rolled out and everyone's happy with it, you then delete that toggle, and then you want to add another one later on called new feature enabled. You don't want it to clash with the old toggle in case someone's left something lying around that still queries the old one. Which also gets us to the interesting point of, do you allow people to query toggles by name, or do you force that they have to use the ID? And what is the ID? Do you use a GUID, or do you use the name of the toggle? Make it unique somehow. Decisions. I think I'm going to let the ID be an implementation detail of creating a new thing. So I will say our name is going to be my toggle. There's another part. If we're doing this from a Restful API, we need our names to be, well, I suppose we can URL encode them later, but I wouldn't want a toggle called that, because then I'd have to URL encode that as %20. Let's call it first toggle. Now, is a description for a toggle required? So I only want to make creating a new toggle take in required things. You're likely to specify a description at creation time though, and I don't really want that to be 2 events, so I think we end up with 2 overloads. You end up with, let's call this 1 and this 2. This will have a description of my other toggle. And finally, we have a state. So toggles are going to be Boolean. They're either on or off. I guess they need a default state. When you create a toggle, it should be by default on, or by default off. The next question is, do you allow inverted toggles? So when you say this toggle is active, if someone queries it, it returns false. Yeah, that sounds messy. I think we'll leave it. We'll leave it as toggles are off by default. Because the likelihood is you're creating a toggle, you won't want to switch it on straight away. That sounds reasonable to me. So, we have our first things. Now, as I'm going to just be hacking this around, I'm not going to put this into the main project straight away. I'm just going to create it in here, so that I only have to recompile this project to run my tests. So let's have a public class toggle. Have a private. Let's do ctor. And we'll make that private for now. And we'll have a public static toggle create new, which has a string name and a string description, which is string.empty by default. Can you really not do that? Oh, I have to do that instead. Oh well, every day's a school day. And that's going to return. Now, I wanted to make this event sourcey, but I don't really want to depend on any particular framework for doing it. Because I don't think a domain model should know about its frameworks. So we need a way to apply an event, and we need an event. So we'll start off with the event. So we create a new toggle. Then we're going to apply event somehow. We're going to have a new toggle created. I'm not going to bother giving the word event on the name. It needs an ID, I think. By default, I just want to give it a GUID as an ID, because that makes things easy. Why not require a boolean at creation time, thus making toggles always opinionated? Because I'm not sure I want to. I don't really have a particular reason for it. I might, if I was going to be exposing that through the UI, I'd probably, even if there was a toggle, even if there was a checkbox for initial state, I'd probably just make it emit two events, effectively creating the toggle and then a second one setting its state to on or off. And as this is mine, I can be opinionated. Don't have to bow to your peer pressure. I'm not sold one way or the other, and as this is just being hacked together at the moment, I can always come back and change that later, before I release anything. Otherwise we then have to deal with event versioning. I am more concerned about this IDs. I think using a GUID is the best idea. And then the name is what you'll query them by most of the time. But the GUID can then uniquely refer to one in its domain, whereas the name might refer to a current feature toggle, as opposed to one that existed in history with that name. Yeah, that'll do for now. So, GUIDs are great because I don't have to worry about synchronization. Name, description. So we apply the toggle the event somehow, and then we return toggle. So the easiest one to create is this feature toggle. This is an event. Let's actually call that ID. We'll delete that and generate all of our code using Sharper. I guess technically. Get only auto property ID. Yes, that's right. So events are immutable. Once you've created one, it's staying like that. And now we have to figure out how to apply it and what kind of convention we want for applying things. Now, while I normally use something that involves a bit of reflection magic to pick the right handler, I think I'm going to start off with something a little more manual first. And I am going to implement it just straight in the toggle class for now. If I end up with a separate aggregate that has other things, or other events coming into it, then I'll extract it into a subclass or superclass. But for now, I think we can just do it as a map. I don't know. Handlers. That's a good name. Nice and generic. I hope my sarcasm is coming across in this. And that's going to map a type, which should be our event, to an action of object. I think. Yeah, and then if we have a private method called register, void register. You wouldn't believe that English is my native language, would you? T event and an action of T event, which is the handler. Yeah. So what we do is we do handlers add type of T event, and then this is, now we need to wrap it up into an object, so we do E, which is the event it'll be handling in the future, invokes the handler, casting the event, the relevant type, I think that'll work. Yeah, why not? Yeah, maybe. We'll see. And we need an apply method as well, and we'll make that protected. Don't want anything outside the class doing. Oh, actually, if there's anything outside, we can make it private. Private void apply. Not sure if I need that. No, I'll put it there for now. The event, and all this needs to do is handlers type of event. What's wrong with that? Oh, I can't remember if I prefer to do. I'm reasonably certain it's better to do that, because you might not have the relevant type. Possibly. So we grab a handler and then invoke it, passing in the event. I'll call that apply. Right. This will currently blow up, which we can prove. Or at least it better blow up. key not found. Right, because we're not registering any handlers yet. Now the reason I didn't put in like an automatic dictionary like so and have my handlers registered in here is because I want to use this register method so that we end up with things looking a little stronger typed. So we're going to register a toggle created event, and we're going to handle it with handle. Handle. Do we handle an event or do we apply it? We apply it, really. Right, so let's rename things. And this is why I just stub these around and I'm not specifically test driving this, because I find that writing most of the tests, this slows me down. I know a lot of test-driven development practitioners disagree with that, but this is just what works for me. I do test-driven development sometimes. Semver, the other day, I was writing the command line handler, could not work out how to get that to work, so I wrote all my tests first and then implemented them in a stupid manner as possible, which part worked, and then refactored it until it looked more pleasant. And I'm not sure I'd have gotten to that point if it hadn't been for the tests. So yeah, I like test-driven development, but not for everything. So this is a void called apply, and it's going to take in a toggle created event, which I'm going to call E. I really want to put this all into a base class just because it's getting in the way. Yeah, I will. Create root. So aggregate root is a domain-driven design term. In the case of our toggle, I've decided that the toggle is the core of the domain. Everything else revolves around the toggle, whether it's on, off, exists, that kind of thing. So all events have a relevancy to it, so that is our aggregate. I might end up with a second aggregate later, which would be a user, which I think will play into with the security of the API, because I think we're going to want the concept of someone being able to query the API without being able to create new toggles. So I think a user should be able to create toggles, like an administrator, but the applications querying the toggle statuses shouldn't be able to create new ones on the fly. So I'm just going to dump all of this back up in here. Needs to see it all. These two come up here and become protected. No, not public, protected. And if I inherit the class, that should help. Right, that's better. So now you've just got all of the methods that we really care about. I'm going to put this above the constructor, because that's what we're really creating the class with. So down at the bottom we will have our private apply methods, and here is where we'll put our public methods, which do domainy things. And then down here we will have our handlers, which apply the results of the domainy things. Very technical terming here. So we've decided that they have an ID, a name, and possibly a description. And with an aggregate, you don't want to expose anything to be modifiable. It has to go through these domainy methods. We have one already, which is our create new. So what I'm going to do is create a public GUID ID. I'm still not sure whether I prefer ID capitalized or lowercase. Technically it should be capitalized. That's what the .NET Framework guidelines say. But everyone at work does that. I'm going to obey the framework. That's going to have a public get and a private set. We're getting close to being able to actually write some tests around this as well. So we're going to have a string called name, which is got a public get and a private set, and a string called description, which is get and again private set. I'm not going to do anything with them by default, but when we apply the created method, we say id equals e.id. Would do if I could type. Name equals e.name, and description equals e.description. So if we do this, we can then say one should satisfy all conditions. Our first condition is that the ID should not be GUID.empty. It should be something, but we don't control it because it's inside. And the name should be what we passed in, which is first toggle, and the description should be a string empty, if everything worked correctly. Which it did. Hooray. So that's creating a feature toggle without a description. When creating a feature toggle without a description, yep, good, I can spell. And then we'll have a second version of the test when creating a feature toggle with a description. And because I'm a bad person, I'm going to copy and paste this. Valid design pattern. If anyone from work watching this, I forbid you to give me any shit at work for this tomorrow. My cool description. More copy and paste. And I think one is a terrible name, so we'll call it toggle, because that's marginally better. Right. So we should now have two tests which both pass. So of course now we want to make sure that people actually call this correctly. So our domain should forbid it, should not allow any external any external things, I can't think of the word at the moment, to put it into an invalid state. So in the case of this, one creating a toggle with no name. Now, although we're forcing a name here, there is nothing stopping you. Let's get rid of the description because we don't care about that at the moment. There's nothing to stop you going, the name is null. Because, I don't have any validation on anything. So what we're going to say is this should throw argument null exception. It's not a very domainy exception, and we might come back later on and change that from an argument null to a toggle must have a name exception. It's nice to have specific exceptions, but as I'm not sure if I'm keeping this or not, or how it's going to be structured, I'm going to wait till later to make that decision. I think that the main key of how I design stuff is trying to push decisions as far away as possible. The longer you can leave a decision, the more information you'll have to hand when you come to make it. That can be protected as well. Right, so that should throw, but we know it won't. So let's prove our test is trustworthy. I don't trust tests that haven't failed, so There's proof that it fails. Now, our validation needs to come here. We don't want to do it after the event's been applied, so we definitely don't want to do it in these apply methods. We'll need to do it beforehand, because there's no point trying to apply an event that isn't valid. So we'll say if string dot is null or white space name throw new any. And I think that has a load overload for the parameter name and a message. And as we're good developers, we'll have a nice meaningful message. Toggles must have a non-white space name. I'm not sure if you put full stops or not. Oh well. We're not going to bother validating the description because we've decided that's optional. So if someone gives a null for the description, we could handle it here by doing. So if there's nothing in description, make sure it's empty. But until I see that as an actual problem somewhere, I'm going to leave it like that. We could also enforce the description being at least a blank string here, if we'd rather as well. That's probably better. Probably. Depends. Slightly more storage, but your event now is always valid, and the apply method can change as it wishes. Yeah, it's one of those things that doesn't really matter until 10 months into the future, where you make a change and realise that half your events are invalid, and now you need to do something to handle a bunch of invalid events. Foresight would be useful, but I don't have foresight. Well, not that good anyway. Now I want to also check that the message contains something useful. Should be should contain name. I don't want to bind to the whole name. I don't want to check that everything is in there, because I might change the error message later on. I don't want to have to change everything. I just want to make sure that the word name appears in it somewhere. I'm also going to make this a theory and put some inline data in. So we'll have null. Oh, we'll not have that. Inline, we'll do an empty string, and inline, and we'll have some white space, which is spaces, and some inline data, which is a tab or two. And I've just thought of another test case as well, which is untrimmed names. So we'll come back and do that in a minute. String name. The name is name. So these should all fail, or all pass rather. All the tests should pass. None of the toggles should be created. Yes. Expression doesn't have a stack trace. What? The test method expected one parameter value, but 0 parameter values are provided. I'm providing them. I don't understand, and yet they passed. This makes no sense. That's definitely XUnit not being happy, isn't it? Params object inline data. String name. Yeah. And it found all of the test cases. That's weird. Well, let's make them fail. Just want to make sure that they do actually fail if the test fails. And Wolfie, yes, I think you're right 99% of the time, although I've written some pretty scary code that does work. One of the few times that I stick comments over things. Right, so the test does fail. We'll leave XUnit and its weird exceptions to itself. Strange. Right, so the other test case I thought of just now was trimming of values. So when creating a toggle and, pardon me, the name has I don't want to say trailing whitespace because I'm going to put a bunch of cases in to make sure that everything works. As leading or trailing whitespace. So again, like before, I'm going to use the theory for this string name, and our theory inline data spaces and a name, inline a name and some spaces, and inline data again, some spaces. Well, that's annoying. Can't have that. It's going to do in my OCD. Yep, good. So what we're expecting from this is to create a toggle. Let's not bother with the toggle variable. We'll just say toggle.createNew, name is name. And I know that I'm not technically needing to do this, but I don't know, sometimes I prefer to put this kind of thing on, especially if I end up with like a default state. I hate having APIs that take in booleans just like that, because at a glance, what does that true symbolize? You have absolutely no idea. Not without going to the method definition or hoping your IDE shows you some useful tooltip. But if you name your parameters, so we can leave name alone, we can just say default state is true, and now someone reading that can just see that it's called default state. It also ties into one of those things that every change in .NET is a breaking change for semantic versioning. So you rename a parameter in a method, breaking change, because if someone else has specified it like this, and then you change the name of that parameter, boom, blows up. So yeah, everything's a semantic version major change. So I'm just going to stick to doing that. So the name, once created, we're now going to say name should be name.trim. Right, those those should all fail. We don't need to test for the case with no trailing whitespace or leading whitespace because that's already covered by the test up here. Good. The fix for this is nice and simple. We can just come into here and just do trim. And we know we won't get an argument null reference exception because we've already validated that name is something. So rerun those tests. Ray. So let's just add that. Huh? Oh, I made changes to the README. Yes. Oh well, I'll just commit that at the same time. Acceptance tests. I could have sworn I renamed that as well. This is why it pays to check your to check the contents of your commits. actually, my next commit is going to take care of that, so I'm going to leave that alone for a second. Acceptance test, implement creation of a feature toggle. Now, we haven't done a very useful creation of a feature toggle, because you can't get at any of the data that it's done, or any of the events that we want to save. So let's move things to the relevant files. Shut that. Right, aggregate root and toggle and rename file. Right, now these need to move. So the aggregate root, what is going on with my selection? Is going to go into a directory called infrastructure. I always end up with an infrastructure namespace in projects. Can't help it. The toggle created is going to go into a folder called events. And the toggle is going to go onto the root. I was going to put a domain folder in there, but as this is my domain, that folder seems a little pointless. The only other thing we're going to do is fix the namespaces of everything. Hopefully that will build still. Especially as we've now moved everything to that project. And everything should pass when we run it all. Cool. Get project, move files and types to relevant projects. Right, now as I mentioned earlier, we don't actually have a way of getting those events out of the aggregate, because we're going to want to allow people to save it. So what we need to do is we're going to have to refactor the aggregate root. Now at this point I haven't got any tests specifically for this class. They're covered by the acceptance tests at the bottom, which I think, now that we look at it, aren't really acceptance tests anymore. They're toggle creation tests. So let's rename them that. Toggle created tests. Oh, can't type anymore. So that's something nice. .NET Core, no more project files mentioned explicitly in project files, which means you have less CH project file merge conflicts, which is great. Tests, better name for the test class. What do you mean? Oh, I should probably actually tell Git to do something. Good. So what we're going to do now is add, that's the wrong key, delete and insert being right next to each other. Good idea. We'll have a directory called infrastructure, and that's going to have a single class called aggregate root tests. I'm going to blame it on having a really small font that I can't read what I'm typing. Could also be that I'm really bad at typing, despite, you know, typing all day every day. So root. Now, did I make aggregate root abstract? I can't remember. I think I did. Nope, but it should be. Which means that doesn't work anymore. So for our tests, we're going to need a private class test aggregate, which inherits aggregate root. Haven't decided what's going to go in it yet. So the tests that I want to write is that when we apply events, we can apply them and then read all of the events that have been applied to an aggregate but have not been saved, and that after we call save there are no pending events. So just by saying that out loud, I've realised what properties we need on it. So if we have our aggregate equals new. Now that's something else that I'm not sure if I like or not. Is a common convention is to call this sut, which is the subject under test. And while I think that is helpful in the most part, I also feel that your tests should be fairly specific to what they're testing. And in this case, because we're fairly specific to the aggregate we're testing, all my tests are going to read as, when doing something on the aggregate, this should happen. I don't need to call it the subject under test because I know it's the subject under test. I'd rather it have an be called aggregate because then I know at a glance that we're testing an aggregate. Also means if you've got multiple fields in there, you're not going to be confused as to what you're testing. Personal preference, I guess. So, when there are no events to be saved, I'm going to fill these out yet. I'm just going to write out all of the test cases that I want to cover. So, when there is when an event is applied, so this is us calling aggregate.apply event for some reason. When an applied event has been saved, do I need any others? I don't think so. So, aggregate pending events, we'll make it a get. I don't want it to be a property. I want it to return a collection each time. Should be empty. So we're going to want a public apply method, so this is why we use a test aggregate, because we can now do something cheaty. So we're going to need it to do something, otherwise it'll get an error. So we say register. Let's have our private class test event 1. Because I think I'm going to end up with a test where I'm going to test 2 of these things. Make sure that both appear and they appear in the right order. Test event 1. And to handle it, we're just going to do nothing. Good. That's one of the reasons why to not use reflection. I can just specify nothing's going to happen when we handle that event. So we need a method to apply it. Void apply test event 1. Let's call it raise event 1, and that's going to apply event new test event 1. Now we also need a get pending events. We don't want it on the test aggregate. This actually wants to be on the aggregate root. For the moment I'm going to make it public, but what I tend to do with this is make it an explicit interface implementation so that users of the aggregate root don't get to see all of these special methods that we're going to end up creating for events. They have to cast it to a special, I don't know, event source, event stream, something like that. Just because it's nice to keep our APIs as narrow to their purpose as possible. We don't want to confuse people with lots of extra methods, and we certainly don't want people calling these accidentally and clearing out things and making invalid states happen. We're going to say this is not implemented yet, because it's not. Riders import is really rubbish. I haven't updated it yet either, because I still haven't gotten around to sorting out my license. So I shall just grumble and manually import things. So now we want to say when an aggregate has an event applied to it, aggregate.get pending events should be, you know what, I want to pass in the event because I want to check that the exact event is used. So object e, I'll do this, let's just call it raise. Raise new test event, except we can't do that. We want to say var test event. So we now want to say, was that specific test event seen? Should have single item. What is your problem? Single item. Candidates are an enumeral of object string. I don't understand. That should be right. I could have sworn you could just do all of that in one line. I'm sure I wrote that yesterday. Oh well, clearly I'm going more mad than I am normally. Right, so we now have roughly the same test, except this can just go in here. So we're now going to say aggregate dot. Now the aggregate itself, I don't want it to do the saving. I just wanted to expose them, and then I want a method to clear off pending events. So we'll say clear pending events. So this will be called after the data command object, whatever. The data command will call, or the save method will call get pending events, commit them somewhere. Assuming they're committed successfully, it will call clear pending events. So after you call clear pending events, the pending events should be clear. And we're going to need a clear pending events, otherwise this is not going to compile. That doesn't return anything. Now, the reason you don't want to have a single method called like get and clear pending events is because what happens if your transaction fails after you've fetched all of those events? You don't want to fetch all the events and clear them off the aggregate only to find your transaction fails and now you've lost all your events but you've not saved something, but domain logic has happened. That's how to get bugs. Right. These should all fail. This is why I didn't implement get pending events as a returning enumerable empty, because otherwise that would succeed and that would succeed, and I want everything to fail. You know, failure is always an option. Controlled failure. Good. Everything fails. So let's implement some stuff. Get pending events. So we're going to need some kind of collection. So we're going to say return pending events. I'm going to need an object. Let's have a field. Let's use a list, because we want to maintain order as well. Not like that. New list of objects. So when you apply an event, after we now, do we add it to the list of pending events before or after calling apply? I have no idea. I'm gonna say before, because if your handler blows up, the fact that event was created is more important than whether you actually successfully applied it, because you could rewrite your applier later. And yes, Shakalred, ask away. And if I know the answer, I'll take a good guess at it. So we're going to add the event to this list here. Yeah, so that's actually a good test we could write as well, is making a handler that blows up when something is applied and validating that we still have the event registered for dealing with. I think that's a good idea, but I'm not certain. Oh, we now have two that work as well. That's weird. Why did that pass? Oh, I suppose it should pass, yes, because we not only returned a list, but we actually added stuff to it. Okay, I'll let that off. Now, clear pending events. That's nice and easy. Let's go pending events. Clear. Right. I don't understand how you can make private class name inside its own class. So from the look of the code block that you've posted, it's not actually doing anything as such. Effectively, let's go to this scratch pad a second. So effectively you have this public class node list. So we have an object called node list, and internally we can make some private fields, like a name, or anything else. Now the type name, or the type of name is a string, but it could conceivably be something else. So like a node list, for instance. We're just saying that this class contains a reference to another class called node list, or another class of node list. Which means if we just make this public a second, you'd be able to say equals new node list, and you'd be able to just do next dot next dot next dot next. And the first one will blow up because it's not pointing at anything yet. You probably want a method like void add node list other node, and now you just say next equals other node. And now, if you were to create one, you'd say equals, let's say 1 equals equals new node list. 2 equals new node list, and you can now say 1.add 2. And now the field called next inside this instance of 1 will be pointing to 2. Yes, exactly. It points to another instance of the same class. Assuming you assign it to something, it'll be null by default. I'd imagine there's probably something on Stack Overflow for this. Let's do C#. I assume you're talking C# here. Yeah. I can't actually paste this into my chat channel because I have the chat open on my mobile phone because I don't have a second monitor plugged into my laptop. But yeah, if you just search online for Stack Overflow linked list C#, there you are. You have the top 5, 6, 7. No, the first top 6 should be relevant. But yes, that's what to search for. You're welcome. Generally, you'll find 99% of answers to programming questions on Stack Overflow. If you've not come across it, it's a brilliant resource, and I have no idea how I'd manage to do my job without it. I'd probably be yelling about or complaining about Experts Exchange. Right, this test should now work now that we've made our clear method do something. Excellent. Now, the next test case I want to do is prove that when we apply many events, they actually appear in the correct order. Because if our events don't have the right order, bad things happen. When multiple events are saved. So what we shall do is just do var events equals new array of new test event. New test event. New test event. Alright, three's a good number. What is its problem now? No best type for an oh, okay. Typo, right. Right, now we want to say events dot for each. I have nothing that imports an each method on them. Oh well. Do this. Get rid of that. The longer I've programmed, the more I dislike having single statements and curly braces. And I get the whole benefits of not having it because, you know, you might end up with heartbleed, for instance, which I believe was caused by having a multi-statement like this. Like, I don't know, do something bad. But I still prefer having it like this. So now what we want to say is aggregate got get pending of should be I hope that does equality of the elements, not of the array itself. We'll find out if it blows up, I suppose. Clearly it does. Oh yeah, and that's an enumerable anyway. Although it's And it's a list in the background. Yeah, good. Now, I haven't bothered implementing anything like an index or a count on the event, a sequence number, because I don't need them yet. I'm sure when it comes to actually implementing a database, I will need one, chiefly because you need to be able to guarantee the order of things if two competing sources of events, say you have two nodes hosting this project, and both of them receive a command to do something to an event, to an aggregate, and they both emit the event at the same time. You need to make sure you can apply those in order or disallow one of them because it's stale. But again, I'm not going to worry about that yet. So what have we done here? We have proved that our aggregate works. And committed lots of whitespace errors. I'm not having that. Is that doing anything? Can't tell. See, this is what I was saying about the other day. Well, Rider sometimes doesn't format test classes. No idea why it doesn't. Luckily, it's only one line. I did have a large class at work the other day, which needed a formatting after I'd done a lot of work to it. And Rider was refusing to reformat it, so I just had to open it in Atom and hit save. Shouldn't really be necessary to do that, but hey ho. I think this evening I will actually get round to updating my JetBrains license so that I can have the new version of Rider, which might work better, maybe. Right, git cm aggregate root support saving events. Haven't implemented loading events. So we need to implement loading events as well. Now we have two options with that. We can either make it something that the aggregates do, like passing it in through the constructor, or we can have a public method that does it. I generally prefer the public method because that means I don't have to expose my private constructors. What I'll end up doing is on the toggle class, where we have a public static method, we'll end up with public static toggle load from an IEnumerable of object, which are our events, and we will toggle equals new toggle, return toggle. And here, instead of calling the apply event, we'd have something like load from event, like that. By making this a method on the aggregate root, void load from events, IEnumerable object events, we can, well, I'll write the tests in a minute, I promise. We'll do for each events, we'll apply it, but the problem here, and I think this is mostly down to the fact that I've written this code many times before now, is that by using this apply event method, we're actually adding them to our pending events collection, and we really don't want that, because you don't want to load something from an event stream and then call save on it and have it replay all of the same events on top of itself again. That would be bad. So what we can do is call clear pending events afterwards. The other option would be to do that. Which I think I prefer. Because at least now, yeah, I prefer doing this because every time you add an item to a list, once it exceeds the list's capacity, it doubles the backing array in length. So say we had a collection of 257 events, the application of the 257th will cause the array to double in length. So we can save some allocations by doing this, by not even filling the array when we're repopulating. And the likelihood is we're not going to hit that we're not going to cause that anyway, because each time the aggregate is loaded and something is done to it, there's only going to be 1 or 2 events being applied at a time. It's not like you're going to load it, change the name, change the description, switch it on or off 400 times, change the name and the description again. You're only probably, I mean, the standard use case of this is going to be toggling it on or off, which means 1 event at a time, generally. I'm going to make this protected. No, I'm not actually. I'm going to leave it as public for now because I'm going to hide everything in a minute. So, and technically I shouldn't have implemented that because I should have written some tests first, but I'm now going to write the tests to prove that I'm right. It's nice to prove you're right. When loading from events. So we shall have that, and we'll just say yeah, we have a separate instance for each test, so we can just do load from events, aggregate pending events should be empty. Let's just refactor that a little bit. Now the only other thing I think we need to do is prove that when an event is applied, it actually does something. I mean, other classes are testing it when we call apply directly, but we need to actually check that the handlers run when we load from events. So what we shall do here is have a public list of object scene events private set scene events equals a new list, and all we're going to do is whenever we see an event we're just going to add it. Oh, it would if I could spell. Just do that as well. Right. So let's unrefactor this. So we call load from events, and now we say aggregate should satisfy all. The reason we use this should satisfy all conditions is it means that each assertion will run even if the others fail. So if I do this, then we just say scene aggregate.scene events, and I'm deliberately saying this will pass because we've implemented that, and this should fail. So when we run it, you should get to see what happens with the should satisfy all conditions. So you can see here we have one error showing. If I just say should be events, so now both will fail. If you just had these written as separate statements, this one would fail first, and you'd never get to see whether that one passed or not until you fix this one. Now, while there is a lot to be said for not having multiple assertions in a method, sometimes I think it's better to do multiple assertions, like here for instance, because the only other way for me to test this would be to reproduce the test again down below. I might as well just check that both things are satisfied. So we can see here, my first assertion failed and my second one did, but they were both run. So what we want to say is this should be empty, and the scene events should be events. Again, previous experience dictates that that's doing element comparison rather than collection. So it should work. Maybe. Yay! So the reason I wanted to do that was to make sure that our implementation of this works successfully. Because if I'd done that... No. Where's it gone? This one would still pass, because our pending events is always going to be empty, because we haven't done anything. Right. And as I've messed about with things, let's do that. And we can commit that. Git add everything. Oh, or see, why won't you reformat my code? Let's see. There's a keyboard. Reformat. Thank you for doing nothing. So let's add that. Hopefully no more white space errors. Good, there aren't. And all we've done here is it's aggregate root implement loading from events. And finally, because I keep mentioning it, I'm going to hide the implementation of this. So what we're going to do is extract an interface, which I think we can do from ReSharper. The methods we want to extract are getPending, clear, and load. Those two can stay as they are. And we're not going to call it an iAggregate, it's going to be an iEvent thing. I don't know what to call it. It's technically a source of events, but it's also a consumer of events. Is there a word for something that's a source and a consumer? Ask Google. Word for source and consumer. This is single source of truth. Word of mouth. Heterof. I have no idea what that means. It's an organism that cannot fix carbon from inorganic sources. Cool, but not useful. Well, not in this context. I'm tempted to call it an iEvent pipe, because you know pipes send things in and out. It's not really a sink. That only implies one way. An iEvent transducer. God, why is naming things so hard? iEvented. That'll do for now. Can always come back and rename it later. So that can live in its own class. Blank line at the end. Now what we're going to do is, hopefully, can I make this do it for me already? Convert, no. Want to implement it privately. How do you make an explicit implementation of an event? Can you do that directly from here? Refactor, generate code. No, clearly remember the syntax for it, which I can never remember. I think it's this. It would be if I didn't delete half my text. I thought it normally told you off if you tried to implement half of an interface privately. Right, so we've now hidden it, which means that half our tests won't compile anymore. Such as this one. Because now we have to do this. I evented and wrap it in more brackets. And look, closure. And our aggregate tests will fail because we've now hidden everything. Can I get away? No, I don't. I can't just cast the whole thing. That's annoying. I'm already regretting this slightly. But pain for one set of tests isn't too bad in the grand scheme of things. And it'll stop me calling this in places where I shouldn't be. It now means that when we go to the scratch pad and we create a toggle, that toggle will create new what is this. We've now only got methods on it, or we don't have any methods on it yet, that relate to the domain. We've hidden all of the fact that it can be saved and loaded from view here. And our command later, which will do the saving, can just cast anything passed into it to be a... Actually, when we just make the parameter an I evented, and it'll be able to pass this in, I think. So if we had a private void save, I evented aggregate, we could say aggregate get pending event for each output right line pending event dot get type name and then do aggregate clear pending events. That's effectively all the save method's going to do, other than except for writing it just to the screen. It's going to actually do some saving. So you say save toggle, because toggle implements that interface. And now we have something that doesn't care what kind of aggregate it gets in, as long as it can be saved. Undo that, can I? Why is there no source control on here? I'm sure there used to be. Hold down Control Z instead. Most of the way. Right. So here we have changed the test, made aggregate root abstract. No, we've added I evented to it, and hidden it all behind that. Aggregate root, hide event related methods behind I evented interface. Right, so that involved a lot less domain modeling than I was hoping. I think the next thing to do tomorrow, because I kind of want to go to bed, we'll end up adding some methods that actually do things. So something like public void change name, which will need to do something, and more interesting methods like toggle on, and obviously toggle off as well. Or do we implement it as just toggle and it'll flick the state between internally represented known states? Not sure. Yeah, as you can see from this, a lot of my development just involves saying that I'm not sure about things and making stuff up as I go. Now let's create a repository. 102, geez. Crispin. I probably should have picked a name that I can type without misspelling it each time. Yep, that's all fine. Yep. Git remote add origin insert. Git push origin master u. Right, refresh. Great, source code is up there. So if you feel like having a look at it, for how little code that I've written in an hour and a half, or however long I've been streaming for, or want to just have a play around with it, it's up on GitHub. My GitHub links and such are in the profile at the bottom of this. And that's all I had for this evening, so thank you very much for watching.